My son took me to a local pub. The bartender grabbed my hand and said something shocking. My name is Isaiah Holloway, and I'm 70 years old. All my life, I believed that if you worked hard, treated people right, and raised your children with love, you'd earn a peaceful old age. I was wrong. Last week, my son Andre took me to a fancy pub. When he stepped away to take a call, the young bartender leaned in close, his face pale with worry. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Sir, your son isn't on a call. He's meeting someone, and you need to know who." 5 minutes later, I was climbing out of a bathroom window, my old bones protesting every move. What I saw in that dark alley broke my heart, and then hardened it into something cold and unshakable. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And hit that like and subscribe button if you believe a person's dignity is worth fighting for, no matter their age. My visit had started 2 days earlier when I first stepped into my son's kitchen. It was spotless, too spotless. Not clean, but sterile. Everything was either pure white or cold gray, from the marble countertops that looked untouched to the stainless steel fridge standing like a tombstone. No family photos, no vacation magnets, no warmth. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a showroom pretending to be one. I sat awkwardly on a tall stool, my old work boots scuffing the polished floor. Brooke, my daughter-in-law, was arranging a salad on a plate. It looked more like art than food. Perfectly placed greens, avocado slices, and seeds sprinkled just so. But she wasn't planning to eat it. She was photographing it, circling the plate, chasing the perfect light. "You have to capture the authenticity of the moment," she said, eyes glued to her phone. I wondered what was authentic about a $20 salad no one would ever eat. I looked down at my hands, rough, scarred, and calloused from 50 years of working with wood and steel. That was real. Then Andre walked in, holding 2 glasses of wine. "Try this, Dad. It's a French red," he said, smiling. "Not like that cheap stuff you used to drink." I pushed the glass away gently. My wife, Annette, never liked alcohol in the house after what her father went through. Andre knew that. Maybe he'd forgotten, or maybe he just didn't care anymore. "So, Dad," he said, turning to Brooke, "tell her one of your stories. The one about how you built the wood shop yourself." I started to tell it, the real story. About scavenging scrap lumber because we couldn't afford new. About the storm that nearly tore the roof off, and how Annette and I spent the whole night with buckets and tarps fighting to save it. Those were our memories, the foundation of everything we built. Then Andre cut in with a forced laugh. What Dad means is he presented a strong business plan and secured funding from an angel investor who believed in his vision. He winked at Brooke. "He's just too humble to admit it." I fell silent. He wasn't just interrupting. He was rewriting my past, turning years of sweat, struggle, and friendship into something glossy and fake. "I'm just glad you finally sold the place," Andre said casually. "It was a burden. Now you can relax and enjoy retirement." A burden. That's what he called my wife's legacy. The place that held 40 years of our laughter and labor. My chest tightened. I looked at my son, trying to see the little boy who once ran through that shop with sawdust in his hair. But that boy was gone. In his place sat a stranger fluent in the language of money and image. After dinner, when Brooke went upstairs for her evening meditation, Andre placed a thick stack of papers in front of me. The sharp smell of printer ink hit the air. "What's this?" I asked. "Just some investment paperwork," he said smoothly. "A fantastic portfolio for retirees. Zero risk, steady returns. It'll set you up for life." He flipped to the last page and tapped a blank line beside my printed name. "You just need to sign here. I'll handle the rest." I looked at the 30 or so pages filled with tiny legal text. "Let me read it first," I said, reaching for the stack. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. His smile vanished. "Dad, you don't need to. It's complicated stuff. I've already gone through it. It's good for you, I promise." "Son," I said quietly, "I haven't signed a thing in 70 years without reading it first. I'm not about to start now." The room went still. The air felt heavier. I could feel his impatience pressing down like a weight. Something wasn't right. He sighed, exasperated. "Fine," he muttered, "but don't take too long. Good opportunities don't wait forever." Then he walked out, leaving me alone with those papers, and a creeping sense of dread that sank deep into my gut. To make up for the tension, he took me to a pub the next evening. But it wasn't the kind of pub I knew. This place was sleek, dark, and quiet, filled with perfume, designer suits, and drinks that cost more than a week's groceries. The music was soft, almost like a slow heartbeat. Everyone looked young, confident, glued to glowing screens. I felt like a ghost from another time, a black and white photo in a digital world. Andre sat beside me, restless, glancing at his phone every few seconds. He didn't ask what I wanted. He just ordered me a fancy cranberry drink with a green sprig sticking out of it. His mind wasn't here. Neither was his heart. Then his phone buzzed. Relief flickered across his face. It's work. Big client from overseas. I have to take this, he said, already standing. I'll be right back. But I knew he wouldn't. I sat there, an old man in a flannel shirt surrounded by strangers who spoke a language I didn't understand. The music hummed. The ice in my glass melted. Then the bartender approached, a young man, maybe 25, with sharp eyes and a quiet intensity. He wiped the counter, but kept watching me. "Excuse me, sir," he said softly. "Are you Mr. Holloway?" "Isaiah Holloway." I frowned, surprised. Nobody here knew my name. I was just Andre's old father, a relic. "I am," I said cautiously. "How do you know me?" He set down his cloth, leaned in closer, and the polite smile faded from his face. It was replaced by something real, something that made my heart start a pound. "My name's Leo," the young man said quietly. "My mother is Maria. She used to work at the laundromat on 8th Street years ago. You and your wife, Mrs. Annette Holloway, used to come in every Saturday." The sound of my wife's name in that cold, unfamiliar place was like a sudden warmth spreading through my chest. Annette. It had been 2 years since I lost her, yet the grief could still cut like broken glass. I remember Maria, a quiet woman who worked harder than anyone I'd ever met. "I remember your mother," I said softly. "A good woman. How is she?" Leo smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached his eyes. "She's doing well. Retired now. Still talks about Mrs. Holloway all the time." He paused, and the light in his face dimmed, replaced by something heavier. "I was just a kid back then," he said. "One winter, I came down with pneumonia. My mom couldn't afford the medicine and was terrified of losing her job if she missed work. Somehow your wife found out. She showed up at our apartment one afternoon, with groceries and the medicine from the pharmacy. She told my mom not to worry about work for a week. She just helped, never asked for anything in return, never told anyone." Leo lowered his gaze, then looked back up. "My mother never forgot that. And neither did I. Mrs. Holloway, she was one of the good ones." Hearing him speak about Annette, that was like drinking cool water after a long, dry walk. It reminded me of the world Andre had left behind, a world where kindness wasn't a transaction, where people looked out for one another. That was the world Annette and I had built. For the first time all day, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like myself again, like Isaiah Holloway, husband to Annette, a man who still mattered. But then Leo's expression shifted. The warmth vanished. He glanced over his shoulder, scanning the room like someone afraid of being overheard. His movements grew tense, every gesture deliberate. The quiet clink of the glass he set down sounded loud enough to make my pulse jump. Then, unexpectedly, he reached across the bar and grabbed my forearm. His grip wasn't painful, but it was firm, urgent. "Listen to me, Mr. Holloway," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the music. "You need to listen carefully." I nodded, my heart beginning to pound. "Your son, Andre, he's not on a business call," Leo said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "He's not meeting a client." I started to speak, but he squeezed my arm tighter, silencing me. "He's out back," Leo continued, nodding toward a door marked staff only. "In the alley. He's with a man in a suit, a man who looks like he breaks things for a living. I've seen them together before. This is the 3rd time this month." My mind struggled to make sense of it. An alley, a man in a suit. What could that mean? Then Leo delivered the final blow. "They're not talking about investments, Mr. Holloway," he said quietly. "I heard them last week. They were arguing about your house." About selling it. And your son. He hesitated, his eyes flickering with fear. Your son didn't sound forced. He sounded like he was leading it. The words hit me like a punch. The warmth of Annette's memory vanished, replaced by a chill that went straight to my bones. The paperwork. The rush to get me to sign. Andre's irritation when I insisted on reading it. It all crashed together into one ugly truth. My son wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to take from me. The hum of the bar faded until all I could hear was the frantic thudding of my own heartbeat. Leo saw the realization in my eyes. He gave my arm one last squeeze, then released it, picking up his cloth and pretending to polish the counter again, as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened, and everything had changed. My thoughts were spinning, but my body moved on instinct. I couldn't face Andre, not now. He'd see it in my eyes. The betrayal, the hurt, the knowledge. I stood up, left the untouched drink on the bar, and walked toward the restrooms with a calmness I didn't feel. My steps were steady, my face unreadable. The bathroom was small, one stall, one sink, and a tiny frosted window near the ceiling. It wasn't meant for escape. But tonight, it would have to be. My heart hammered, but my mind was clear. The old man who had walked into that pub was gone. In his place stood someone different, someone driven by a cold, steady anger. I dragged a heavy trash can beneath the window. It reeked of sour beer, but I didn't care. I climbed up, my knees screaming in protest. The latch was stiff with rust. For a moment, I thought it wouldn't budge. I forced it open, scraping my knuckles raw. The window screeched as it gave way. Cold night air hit my face like a slap. I pulled myself up, muscles straining, joints groaning, but the fire in my gut burned hotter than the pain. Half in, half out, I must have looked ridiculous. But I didn't care. I pushed through and tumbled hard onto the damn pavement outside. For a moment, I just lay there, stunned. Then I got up, shaking, every bone aching, but I had to see it. I had to know. The next morning, I was awake before sunrise, but I didn't get out of bed. When Andre knocked on my door, I waited a moment before answering, forcing my voice to sound weak. "I'm not feeling so good, son," I said, coughing lightly. "Think I'll just rest today?" My old bones are telling me to slow down. Through the door, there was silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Then his voice came, smooth and practiced. "Oh, of course, Dad. You rest. Brooke and I will bring you some breakfast." I didn't want their breakfast or their concern. I wanted them gone so I could think. An hour later, Brooke came in carrying a tray, a small bowl of oatmeal and a glass of orange juice. "We're so worried about you, Ike," she said in that syrupy, artificial tone. "You really need to listen to your body at your age." At your age. The words were coated in fake concern, but underneath was something else, dismissal, condescension. And now, I could finally hear it for what it was. They treated me like I was fragile, unreliable, maybe even a little senile. And I played along. I took a few polite bites of the oatmeal Brooke made and told her it was delicious, even though it tasted like wallpaper paste. Andre appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. "Just take it easy today, Dad," he said smoothly. "Don't worry about a thing, especially not those complicated papers. I told you I'd handle everything." He smiled, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. Every word carried a second meaning. "Take it easy meant don't ask questions. Don't worry meant don't think too hard. And I'll handle everything was a warning." I nodded slowly, eyes down. "Thank you, son," I murmured. "I'm lucky to have you looking out for me." The lie burned in my throat, but I swallowed it. For now, pretending was my only weapon. When the front door finally clicked shut, my act ended. I wasn't a tired old man anymore. I was a hunter, and my prey had just left the house. My hands trembled, but my mind was clear. There was only one person I could trust. I pulled out the old tablet Andre had given me 2 Christmases ago. He'd said it would help me stay connected. I'd barely used it, but I knew how to make a call. I scrolled through my contacts until I found her name and press call. The line rang twice. Imani Vance speaking. Her voice was exactly as I remembered. Firm, no nonsense, steady as steel. "Imani," I said, my voice rough. "It's Ike. Ike Holloway." There was a pause, then warmth softened her tone. "Ike, good Lord, it's been too long. How are you holding up, old man?" We hadn't spoken since Annette's funeral. Imani had been Annette's closest friend, back when they were young women fighting for change in our community. She'd gone on to become a lawyer, a fierce one, but she'd never forgotten where she came from. "I'm holding on," I said, "but I need your help. It's about Andre." The warmth vanished. Her voice turned professional, focused. "What's he done?" "You want me to sign some papers," I said carefully. "He calls them investment documents. Says they're for my retirement. But he's in a hurry, and something doesn't feel right." I didn't mention the bar, or Leo, or the alley. Not yet. I needed facts first. Imani was silent for a moment, thinking. She knew me well enough to know I wasn't the kind of man who panicked without reason. "All right, Ike," she said finally. "Listen carefully. Don't sign anything. Not even napkin. Do you understand me?" "I do," I said. "But how can I get you the papers? Does that son of yours still have you using that tablet I told you to get?" "Yes." "Good. The camera on that thing is better than you think. I'm texting you my private email. Take a clear photo of every single page of those documents. Make sure the lighting's good, the corners are flat. Then email them to me. Can you do that?" It sounded complicated, but her confidence steadied me. "I can do that," I said. "Good man," she replied. "Get them to me as soon as you can. And Ike, be careful. If your gut's warning you, listen to it. It's been right for 70 years. We hung up. Moments later, her message appeared. I set the papers on the bed, turned on the lamp, and started photographing each page, one by one. My hands were steady, focused. I felt like a spy in my own son's house. When I sent the last photo, the silence around me changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, watchful. I needed to move. Downstairs, I searched the kitchen for a glass of water. The tile was cold under my stocking feet. I opened a drawer, a neat little junk drawer filled with batteries, rubber bands, and takeout menus. Beneath them was a stack of envelopes bound by a rubber band. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked them up and slid one open. Final notice. My heart skipped. Another. Past due. Another. Immediate payment required. A chill spread through me. The perfect home around me. The designer furniture, the expensive appliances, it was all built on debt and lies. I returned the letters exactly as I found them and looked around with new eyes. The painting on the wall wasn't a painting at all, just a print, a cheap imitation. Brooke's designer handbag on display wasn't leather. It was plastic. Even Andre's prized wristwatch, sitting on his desk, felt hollow, fake, like everything else in this house. My son wasn't just struggling. He was drowning, and he was about to drag me down with him. Then my tablet buzzed. My pulse spiked. "Imani." I answered immediately. "Ike," she said, her voice low and hard now. "I've read every page. Twice." I could hear papers rustling. "Your son is lying to you." The words hit like a blow. "These aren't investment papers," she continued. "There's no portfolio, no retirement plan. It's all fake, Ike, every bit of it." My knees nearly gave out. "Then what is it?" "It's a quitclaim deed," she said slowly, like a judge delivering a verdict. "Do you know what that means?" "No," I whispered. "It means you'd be signing your house, your entire property, over to Andre for the sum of $1. It's hidden deep on page 17 under layers of legal jargon designed to confuse you. It's a trick, Ike. The oldest, cruelest kind." My heart sank. My house. Annette's garden. The porch swing where we'd sat every summer evening. The walls that had held a lifetime of memories. All of it about to be stolen by the boy we raised. "If you sign it," she said, her tone grim, "it's over. You be giving him everything. Your home, your assets, your security. He could throw you out the next day, and there'd be nothing I could do." I sat heavily on a cold kitchen stool. The beautiful, spotless room spun around me. I thought of Andre as a child, his scraped knees and tears after falling off his bike. I thought of his graduation, of the pride that filled my chest that day, of all the sacrifices Annette and I made to give him a better life. And this was how he repaid us. The shock went beyond pain or heartbreak. It settled deep in my bones, cold and still. My son hadn't just betrayed me. He tried to erase me. It was the kind of stillness that comes before a hurricane. Imani was still talking, explaining legal options, what steps we could take next, but her words were fading into the background. My focus was elsewhere, locked on my own reflection in the black screen of the tablet. The fear that had haunted the old man in that reflection was gone. What looked back at me now was something harder, colder. The storm had arrived. When Andre and Brooke came home that evening, the war began. Not with shouting or confrontation, but with small, quiet acts of psychological warfare, subtle enough to make me question my own sanity. I was reading in the living room when Andre walked in. "Hey, Dad," he said casually. "Just want to let you know, I put your keys in a ceramic bowl by the door. That way you'll always know where they are. Don't want you misplacing them." I hadn't misplaced them. They had been on a small table beside my chair, the same place I'd kept them for years. He had moved them. It was a small act, but it carried a clear message. I'm in control here. You're not. The next day, they took it further. At breakfast, I mentioned that I needed to call my neighbor George to check on his wife. Brooke gave Andre a look of exaggerated sympathy before turning to me with her voice dripping in false pity. "Ike, honey, don't you remember? George's wife passed away 6 months ago. We were worried about how you'd take it." I just stared at them. I'd spoken to George last week. His wife Martha was fine. She just won second place in a local baking competition. But the way they looked at me, so sincere, so full of concern, made me hesitate for a split second. Did I imagine it? I thought. Was my mind slipping? Then I saw it. The flicker of triumph in Andre's eyes before he masked it with a sigh. "It's okay, Dad," he said gently, patting my hand. "Memory gets tricky. We're here for you." That's when I understood. They weren't just trying to manipulate me. They were trying to rewrite my reality, to make me doubt my own mind, to make me powerless. Soon, things began to disappear. My reading glasses would vanish from the nightstand and reappear in the refrigerator. My wallet would go missing, only for Brooke to find it later in the sugar bowl. Each time, they'd exchange sympathetic glances, as if caring for a confused old man. But the cruelest blow came from Brooke's phone. That evening, I saw her typing, smiling faintly at the screen. A few hours later, my tablet buzzed. A friend from my old neighborhood had shared a post from Brooke's public page. There was a photo of me, taken that morning when I wasn't looking. I was sitting by the window, the light hitting me in a way that made me look frail and lost. The caption beneath, it was dripping with fake tenderness. "It's one of the hardest journeys a family can face, caring for a parent who's slowly fading away. Some days are clearer than others, but we cherish every lucid moment. It breaks my heart to see the man who was once so strong, now confused by the simplest things. But we face it with love and patience. So grateful for my amazing husband, my rock. Two Hearts hashtag eldercare, hashtag family journey, hashtag dementia awareness, hashtag love my pops, hashtag staying strong." I read the post, and a cold fury took hold of me. They weren't just trying to steal my house. They were trying to steal me. My name, my dignity, my identity. Brooke was crafting a public story, one that made me look like a man lost to dementia. And any protest I made would only seem like proof of it. I closed the tablet and looked at them sitting across the room, smiling at the TV like the perfect couple. Slowly, I let a dazed, vacant expression settle on my face. If they wanted a confused old man, that's what I'd give them. From that moment on, I became exactly what they wanted me to be. The next morning, I shuffled downstairs and asked Brooke, "What day is it today?" "It's Wednesday, Ike," she said sweetly, her tone full of patience. I nodded, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the table. 5 minutes later, I looked up again. "Andre, what day is it today?" They exchanged a look, quiet satisfaction. "It's Wednesday, Dad," Andre said, speaking slowly, like he was talking to a child. I lowered my eyes, pretending confusion. "All right, of course." Inside, I was coiled steel. Every condescending word, every pitying glance, fuel. They thought they were building a cage, but they were handing me the key. Because a forgetful old man is invisible. Harmless. Someone you can talk freely in front of, assuming he won't understand or remember. So I became invisible. I mumbled to myself. I stood in rooms pretending to forget why I was there. I fumbled with the television remote until Andre sighed and turned it on for me. "There you go, Dad," he said kindly. Nice and simple. While he thought I was mesmerized by a documentary about birds, I was listening closely. I heard their whispered conversations about interest rates, Brooke complaining about their upcoming Aspen trip, Andre's hushed call to a man with a voice I recognized from the alley. Just a few more days. My father's not all there. It's just about finding the right moment. They were getting careless, confident. They saw an old man fading away, but they didn't see the man behind the act. The man who was watching, waiting, and piecing everything together. I became part of their game, the fool in their story. And I intended to make that performance flawless, until it brought their whole scheme crashing down. At night, when the house was silent, I stayed awake, my mind racing. On the third night, after their bedroom door clicked shut and the air conditioner began its low hum, I waited an hour, then slipped quietly out of bed. The tablet lay on the nightstand. I took it and crept into the guest bathroom, locking the door behind me. The faint glow of the screen lit the room. I didn't know the name of the man from the alley, but I knew where to start. I typed Andre Holloway and the name of his firm into the search bar. The website was polished, full of smiling faces, glowing testimonials, and promises of financial freedom. It was the public mask. I knew the truth was hidden deeper, so I kept digging. I searched Andre's name with new words: debt, lawsuit, complaint. For a long time, nothing came up, just more articles about success and professionalism. But I'd spent a lifetime finding weak spots in solid wood. I knew patience could split the strongest grain. Finally, I found it, a link to an old investor forum. The headline read, "Warning about Holloway Financial Group." My pulse quickened. The post, written by a retired teacher, told how he'd lost his entire pension in a risky tech fund Andre's firm had pushed. He called Andre a smooth talker, a predator who targeted the elderly. Dozens of replies followed. Widows, young couples, families, all broken by the same man. Each story pointed back to my son. I searched the fund's name and found more. News articles about its collapse, accusations of fraud and mismanagement. This wasn't a mistake. It was a catastrophe. One thread mentioned the aftermath, a company offering rescue loans to desperate investors. The name sent a chill through me. Apex Holdings. I typed it in. The website was stark. No smiles, no warmth, just cold efficiency. On their Our Team page, I froze. It was him, the man from the alley. His name, Silas Thorne. His photo showed a sharp, predatory face, the eyes of a man who enjoyed watching others sink. Now I had him. I searched one last time. Andre Holloway plus Silas Thorne. And there it was. Public records, liens, high-interest loan contracts, enormous penalties. The numbers made me sick. Andre's debts weren't just deep, they were bottomless. I finally saw the truth. The fake watch, the imitation art, the desperate smiles. My son wasn't a greedy man chasing luxury. He was a man being hunted, and the price of his survival, the collateral for his lies, was my house. Annette's house, the only real thing we had left. I turned off the tablet. Darkness filled the room. I sat on the edge of the tub, motionless, the cold porcelain pressing against my skin. The shock was gone. The sadness, too. All that remained was clarity, hard and absolute. I finally understood everything. This wasn't just a story of greed. It was a story of fear, of a son who flew too close to the sun, who gambled with other people's futures and burned them all. And now he was ready to sacrifice his own father to save himself. I saw the moment it all came crashing down. The collapse of that tech fund, the panic that followed, and the sharks circling in the water. Silas Thorne. He didn't just offer loans. He offered lifelines that turned into nooses. My son, terrified and ashamed, grabbed one. He made a deal with the devil to hide his failure. The fancy car, the sterile White House, Brooks' curated online fantasy life. It was all a desperate illusion, an elaborate stage set built to convince the world, and maybe themselves, that they were still winning even as the water rose around their necks. They weren't masterminds. They were frightened children trapped inside an expensive prison of their own making. And my house, my real, solid, paid-for home, was their ransom, the price to keep the shark from devouring them whole. The realization didn't bring forgiveness. The betrayal ran too deep, too deliberately. But it changed the shape of my anger. I wasn't just fighting my son's greed anymore. I was fighting his weakness, his cowardice, the moral rot that began when he decided to sacrifice his own father to save himself. He wasn't a monster. He was a broken man who had made a monster's choice. And I, his father, would have to face what he'd become. By the time dawn began to creep through the blinds, I called Amani again. I hadn't slept. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. She answered on the first ring, her voice alert, as if she'd been expecting my call. Like, what is it? I know why he's doing it, I said quietly. It's worse than we thought. It's not just greed. I spent 10 minutes laying everything out. The collapse fund, the ruined investors, Apex Holdings, Silas Thorne, the mountain of debt, the fake watch, the stack of final notices hidden in the junk drawer. I painted the full picture of the hollow, desperate life my son had built. Amani listened silently, her breathing steady and calm. When I finished, she spoke in a low, deliberate voice. So he's not just a liar, she said. He's a cornered animal. That's worse. Much worse. What are our options? I asked. Legally, we have him, she said. What he's doing is elder financial abuse. With a quitclaim deed and his debts as evidence, we could build a strong case. He could go to prison a long time. The word prison hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, the rage, the thought of my son behind bars felt unbearable. He had destroyed my trust, but he was still my blood, still Annette's boy. No, I said before I could even think. No prison. I won't do that to him. There has to be another way, a way to stop him, to save the house, without destroying what's left of him. There was a long pause. I could almost hear Amani thinking, weighing the options. If we don't use the threat of criminal charges, she said gently, our leverage is limited. He holds the emotional cards, Ike. He's your son. Her words left me momentarily adrift. Then, through the fog of exhaustion, a memory surfaced, a quiet moment from Annette's final week. She'd been sitting on our porch, her voice weak but steady. Ike, she'd said softly, if Andre ever gets into real trouble, the kind his pride won't let him admit, there's something you need to know. Under our old bed, the one we bought when we married, there's a tin box with my grandmother's recipes. But there's something else in there too. My fail-safe. At the time, I dismissed it as the rambling of a sick woman. But now, Amani, I said, feeling a spark of life return to my voice. Annette told me something before she passed. About a box under our bed. I told her what Annette had said. I didn't know what it meant, but it was a thread to pull on, and right now it was the only one I had. That afternoon, I put my plan into motion. I shuffled into Andre's home office, where he was staring at his computer. Leaning against the doorframe, I made sure to look a little unsteady. Son, I said softly, I've been thinking about your mother. He turned, his professional mask melting into an imitation of concern. What about her, Dad? There are some things, her old photo albums, that music box I gave her for our first anniversary. They're still at the house. I feel like I need to see them again, to hold them. I let my voice crack just slightly. I saw the calculation flicker in his eyes. He thought it was another sign of decline, an opportunity. Of course, Dad, he said smoothly. We could go tomorrow. No, I said quickly, then softened my tone. No, son, I think I need to go now. Please, it feels important. He agreed, just as I knew he would. In his mind, a sentimental trip down memory lane would make me easier to manipulate. The drive to my old neighborhood was quiet. Andre played soft jazz, the kind of music no one really listens to. Outside the window, glass towers and trendy cafes gave way to familiar brick houses and old oak trees. It's changed a lot, hasn't it? Andre said, all these old places are being bought up. Property values are through the roof. You were smart to hold on to your place so long. I just nodded. He thought he was talking about real estate. I heard the truth behind it. You were smart to hold on to it for me. Your mother loved this street, I said quietly. She knew every neighbor, every stray cat. She was a great woman, Andre said, his tone rehearsed. She always wanted the best for us. Yes, I said, meeting his eyes. She was always thinking ahead, always making sure the family was protected. He smiled, missing the warning in my voice. When we stepped inside, the air hit me like a memory. The scent of old wood, sunlight, dust, and Annette's lemon furniture polish. It was the smell of home. Every creak in the floorboard was a greeting from the past. The scratch on the hallway wall from Andre's toy truck. The worn arm of Annette's reading chair. This wasn't just a house. It was a living record of a life built with love. Andre followed me, impatient and distracted. To him, it was just an old property. To me, it was sacred ground. I went straight to our bedroom. It looked exactly the same. The old quilt folded neatly on the bed, the sturdy frame that had carried us through nearly 50 years of life. I knelt, ignoring the ache in my knees, and reached under the bed. My fingers brushed against cold metal. The tin box. It was heavier than I remembered, painted with faded roses. Annette used to keep her grandmother's recipes in it. But as I pulled it into the light, I knew this was more than nostalgia. It was her message from beyond time. Her failsafe. Sitting on the floor, sunlight catching the dust in the air, I opened the rusty latch. The smell of old paper and faint cinnamon rose to meet me. On top were the recipe cards, written in Annette's looping cursive. I smiled sadly, running a thumb over one labeled gingerbread, a faint smudge of flour still visible. I lifted the stack carefully and froze. Beneath them was a thick manila folder. No label. Just wait. My heart began to pound. I opened it. Legal text blurred before my eyes until a few key words came into focus. The Annette Holloway Heritage Trust. Irrevocable. Flipping the page, I found the address, 14 Elm Street, my house. It was all there, signed by Annette and a notary 5 years ago, just after her diagnosis. I read the key paragraph 3 times, barely breathing. Asterisk upon my passing. The property shall not be inherited by our son. It shall be donated in its entirety to a registered community land trust for the purpose of providing affordable housing for local families. Asterisk. I leaned back against the bed, papers trembling in my hand, a slow, odd smile spreading across my face. Annette, my quiet, brilliant Annette, had seen this coming. She had seen the weakness in our son long before I could, and she built a safeguard to protect everything we stood for. This wasn't doubt. It was love. Fierce, intelligent, enduring love. My son had tried to sell something he could never own. He was trying to steal a ghost. And in my hand, I held my wife's final move, her checkmate. When I returned to Andre's house that evening, I carried a dusty photo album and Annette's music box, props for my performance. Andre and Brooke looked at me with their practiced mix of pity and irritation, thinking the trip had softened me. They had no idea I'd just armed myself for war. At dinner, I ate slowly, quietly, methodically, like a man savoring his final calm before the storm. That I even complimented Brooke on her cooking, another bland, colorless dish that tasted like cardboard. My calmness seemed to rattle them more than my earlier confusion. They kept exchanging wary glances, trying to figure out what had changed. They probably thought I had finally accepted my fate as a harmless old man, ready to be taken care of. After the plates were cleared, I folded my hands on the table and said evenly, "I've been thinking. You're right, son. It's time for me to stop worrying about all this. I'm ready to sign the papers." A wave of relief washed over Andre's face. It was almost comical how obvious it was. He shot Brooke a triumphant look, their silent celebration. The finish line was in sight. "That's wonderful, Dad," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I'm glad you finally understand. We're just trying to help." "I do," I said, meeting his eyes. "But I have 2 conditions." The smile on his face faltered. "Conditions? I'm an old man, Andre," I said with a faint, self-deprecating smile. "I do things the old-fashioned way. I want my lawyer present when I sign, just to make sure everything's proper. A formality, you understand." He relaxed, visibly relieved. To him, it was a harmless, sentimental request, perfectly in character for a confused old man grasping for control. "Of course, Dad," he said magnanimously. "Whatever makes you comfortable." "And the second thing," I continued, "this partner of yours, the man who arranged this wonderful investment, I'd like to meet him. I want to personally thank him for helping our family. I'd like to shake his hand." Andre practically glowed. In his mind, I had just handed him his final victory. Not only was I agreeing to sign, but I wanted to thank the man who was helping rob me. The arrogance, the sheer, blinding pride, was written all over his face. "Absolutely, Dad," he said. "I'll set up a meeting at his office tomorrow." "That's a great idea." He stood, beaming like the perfect son. He had no idea he'd just agreed to escort himself into his own downfall. Silas Thorne's office was exactly what I expected, a glass tower overlooking the city, cold and lifeless. The space reeked of money and emptiness. A massive mahogany desk, spotless surfaces, no personal photos, no warmth. It was the den of a predator. We arrived first. Andre strutted in with the confidence of a man who thought he'd already won. Brooke followed beside him in a pristine white suit, the picture of shallow triumph. They radiated smug satisfaction, the kind that comes right before a storm. I shuffled in behind them, leaning slightly on my cane, playing the frail old man one last time. Silas Thorne entered moments later, tall, immaculate, with eyes that didn't just look at you, but through you. He greeted Andre with a smooth, practiced smile. "Mr. Holloway," he said, turning his shark-like grin toward me. "A pleasure." Andre laughed lightly. "Dad, this is Mr. Thorne, the man helping secure your future." I nodded slowly, saying nothing. Then Amani arrived. The air in the room shifted immediately. She wasn't smiling. Dressed in a simple dark suit, she carried a worn leather briefcase and an unshakable authority that made Thorne's sleek office feel suddenly cheap. She nodded curtly to him, then stood quietly beside me. The sides were set, Andre and Brooke on one end, greedy and confident. Amani and I on the other, silent but steady, armed only with the truth. Silas leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Well then," he said smoothly, "shall we begin?" He gestured to the folder before him. "We have a simple quitclaim deed transferring Mr. Holloway's property to his son for management purposes. Andre, if you'll pass the papers to your father." But before Andre could touch them, Amani's hand came down on the folder like a blade. "That won't be necessary," she said calmly. Andre froze mid-reach. Brooke's smile faltered. Thorne's expression hardened. Amani opened her worn briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder, the one from Annette's tin box. She placed it on the desk with a deliberate thud. "We seem to have a misunderstanding about the ownership of this property," she said evenly. "Mr. Holloway cannot sign these papers for a simple reason. He doesn't own the house." Andre's face twisted in confusion, then disbelief. He turned to me, searching for some kind of explanation. But when Amani opened the folder, his confusion curdled into horror. "The Annette Holloway Heritage Trust," she read aloud, her voice ringing clear. "An irrevocable trust established 5 years ago. The sole asset, the property at 14 Elm Street." Andre went ghost white. His mouth opened, but no words came. Brooke, though she didn't understand the legal jargon, recognized his expression, and her confidence shattered. "Andre," she whispered, "what is she talking about?" Silas Thorne's charming mask fell away. His eyes hardened, cold, focused, dangerous. The predator realized he'd been trapped. Amani continued, her gaze fixed on Andre. "This house hasn't belonged to your father for years. It belongs to a trust, one your mother created to protect the family's legacy. You tried to sell what was never yours." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear the hum of the city 50 floors below. Amani let it linger before delivering the final blow. "And when you knowingly forge documents to use as collateral for a loan, that's not just deceit, Andre. That's bank fraud. And because the defrauded entity is a trust, this isn't a civil issue. It's federal." That word, federal, cracked the room open like thunder. Brooke let out a strangled sob. No. But Thorne moved first. He shot up from his chair, his composure gone, replaced by raw fury. "I have no part in this," he barked, pointing at Andre. "This little fool came to me, swore the house was his. He brought forged documents, fake appraisals. He lied to me." His eyes blazed toward Amani. "I'm the victim here. I was deceived." Chaos erupted. Brooke broke down, her sobs loud and real, stripped of every trace of her online perfection. "Andre, tell them it's not true," she wailed. "Tell them." But Andre couldn't speak. He sat frozen, hollow-eyed, the illusion of success disintegrating around him. Thorn paced like a cornered animal. "This is a disaster," he hissed, raking his hand through his hair. "A federal case, my firm's reputation." He turned on Andre again, seething. "You stupid, stupid man. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" I watched it all unfold in silence. I felt no joy, no triumph, only sorrow. Watching my son crumble, his world collapsing around him, was the deepest pain I'd ever felt. But it had to happen. The poison had to come out. As the shouting and crying filled the room, my eyes drifted to Brooke. She was falling apart, truly falling apart. Her immaculate mask shattered. Mascara streaked down her face. Her perfect white suit now looked like a costume from a tragedy. "Our trip to Aspen," she wailed through her tears. "My followers, my partnerships, it's all gone." She wasn't mourning love, she was mourning status. The death of her brand. The collapse of her fake, polished world. Finally, I rose to my feet. The cane I leaned on felt heavier, not as a crutch, but as a symbol of strength. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I didn't look at Thorn or Brooke. I looked at my son. He sat motionless, a shadow of the man he once was. "Your mother," I began quietly, "always saw the best in you, Andre. Even when you couldn't. She knew your pride, and your fear of failure could lead you down a dark path. She didn't create that trust to punish you. She did it to protect you." I stepped closer, standing over him, not as a judge, but as a father. She wanted to protect the family's legacy. And that legacy isn't money or a house or some title. It's integrity. It's knowing the difference between what's real and what's just for show. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a worn business card. The director of the Community Land Trust, the very group that now held our home. I placed it gently in front of him. "She left you an opportunity, son," I said softly. "A way back. Go to them. Offer to help. Swing a hammer. Start again. Learn what it truly means to build something real with your own two hands. Not for money, not for recognition, but for your own soul. The choice is always yours." I didn't need to press charges. I didn't need to see him behind bars. The world my son had built for himself was already his prison. I had simply handed him the key. Whether he chose to use it or not was entirely up to him. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door. Amani followed, her hand resting gently on my shoulder for a brief moment. I didn't look back at the chaos I was leaving behind, the shouting, the tears, the shattered illusions. I stepped out of that cold glass tower and into the warm afternoon sun. For the first time in a very long time, I felt peace. I hadn't destroyed my son. I had protected my wife's legacy. I had defended my dignity. Order had been restored. And that was a victory worth far more than any house or any sum of money. That experience taught me one final lesson, a lesson from my wife, Annette. A family's true legacy isn't the property or wealth you leave behind, but the integrity and wisdom you preserve for the future. My son had been drowning in a world of false success, and in his desperation, he tried to drag me down with him. But I learned that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't shielding your children from the consequences of their actions. It's allowing them to face the hard, painful truth on their own. I had to protect our real legacy, one built on dignity and honor, from the illusion of wealth that can quietly destroy a family from within. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place?